Hello, good evening. Shall I try that again? Hello, good evening. Thank you all very much for coming this evening to the presentation that Shubha's going to give us. Please feel welcome, staff, students and guests as well. We're delighted to welcome you to this next one of our Wrexham talks. And it's good to see some old and familiar faces in the crowd as well. So I have the joy of doing the health and safety bit. So we are not expecting a fire alarm this evening. If there is one, please could you follow the signs for the quad and make your way out through that exit, and members of the research team will be there, she says looking at Jack, to guide you should that be necessary. There we are. Thank you, Jack, that's very helpful. Just to say, she was going to present for about 40-45 minutes, and at the end of that time there will be the opportunity for you to ask any questions that you might have of Shubha. And I'm just delighted to be able to chair this presentation from Shubha, having been on your interview panel many years ago. So Shubha came to work in the psychology department back in 2018, and she's our specialist in biological psychology. Shubha brought, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Shubha brought with her a wealth of experience from her research and her practice. Shubha's PhD focused on self-attribution of facial appearance as an early predictor of improvement in depressive mood state. This is in line with her previous clinical research aimed at understanding the behavioural and neural activity that related to mood disorders. Following the completion of her PhD in 2016, Shubha worked predominantly with older adult psychological services at Betsy Cadwallader as an assistant psychologist. In this role, she conducted neuropsychology assessments to support dementia diagnosis and worked with the community mental health teams. Shubha has also worked as a data manager for a clinical trials unit. And in 2020, Shubha achieved chartered psychology status. She's also worked with our students, some of whom are here this evening, with Apparato, who's a company that develops health apps. They've now expanded that to offer digital clinical trial platform. This was to identify the unmet needs of carers and patients with rare genetic diseases. Shubha's going to talk to us this evening about her research with therapy dogs. And after this presentation, there's the opportunity to go along the corridor and to meet some of those therapy dogs if you would like to do that. This is something that I know is very, very close to Shubha's heart. Alongside her research with therapy dogs, Shubha has her own dogs, including a wonderful rescue dog called Walter, who she fostered for a short period of time 3 years ago. The only person who seemed surprised that he was going to stay was Shubha. When she told us in a team meeting she decided to keep Walter, we were okay. The title of this evening's presentation is Pawsome Support for Confident Reading in Children and Easing Stress for University Students. I do have to say, just as an aside, and she will be expecting this, Shubha submitted one of the most disappointing ethics forms I've ever seen. The title for her research was Reading Dogs. I thought, that's amazing. But it quickly transpired the dogs weren't actually doing the reading. So Shubha, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mandy, for that. Lightening the mood. And thank you all for being here, actually. So I didn't expect quite a lot of people, so I'm really happy about that. I'd also like to thank our therapy dog teams who are in the other room, B07, so just down the corridor. They are joining us via the Teams link, so they can listen to us. They are part of the collaborative aspect of one of the research that I conducted, so they are keen to know the results as well. Excuse me. So today I'm going to talk about two of the research that I've done, both with dogs. One, as Mandy mentioned, reading dogs in primary school. That is in relation to children's confidence in reading. and the other one is using therapy dogs for university students. But before we get into that, I just want you to think about the journey that these two species, humans and dogs, made over these several hundreds of years, or thousands, over the evolutionary period, where they bonded, and how we got to the point to actually see the therapeutic value in that relationship. So quick. Yeah. So we know dogs evolved from the wolves, right? And there's evidence to suggest that the domestication of wolves happened sometime over 35,000 years ago. I mean, this is not, everyone doesn't agree with this time period, but it's around quite a long time ago, actually. And we know that based on the migration that happened from Siberia, the grey wolves moving from Siberia to Europe along with the human counterparts. And we know the link between wolves and dogs based on the studies on natural selection. So the way we adapted to the various environments over the years, it's the variations in our genetic material, the gene variation or the chromosomal variations that occurred kind of gives us a glimpse of the connections. So we know that there are gene variations that occurred that shape the skull, the jawline of the wolves, which is also seen in dogs, but also the superpower, the sense of smell. That seems to have also changed dramatically multiple times, and it just shows you how crucial it is for their survival. And that's also seen in both in wolves as well as in dogs. So you kind of map that and see that's how the evolution happened. And it looks like the sense of smell, their superpower, may have something to do with how we started interacting, the humans and wolves. So there is a theory that the initial interaction between humans and wolves actually occurred in the last glacial maximum. So this is the last ice age. So when most of the Earth was covered in ice sheets, we were kind of sharing the resources with wolves and the space as well. So they've probably seen the mutual benefits is one of the theories, that living together in a space shared. So humans kind of recognizing the use of wolves for hunting, as well as wolves realizing some food in there for them. But you can also see that this relationship kind of goes further and beyond the utilitarian sort of limits. So it's not just for hunting or herding animals. There seems to be a relationship that's forged that goes beyond that, a little bit of emotional relationship there. And that we know from the remains of a burial found in Germany about 100 years ago. And this burial had skeletal remains of humans, an older male and a younger female, and also partial skeletal remains of a dog. And a re-examination of this, they realized it's not just one dog. Actually, there was more than one. So there's a younger dog and an older dog. Now, the narrative around that burial changed because of that, because it seems like it's a unit, some sort of family domestic unit there. What was also interesting is that some of the indications on the jaw bone indicated some disease that the dogs had, and they couldn't have survived to their age without the care of the humans. So you're just seeing that bond evolving beyond utilitarian, if you like. And as we evolved, humans, and we learned the art of storytelling, we started to even immortalize that relationship that we have with dogs. The famous dog Argos who's a loyal dog of Odysseus, waited for 20 years. And when he came back in disguise, it was only Argos who recognized him. Likewise, loyalty of dogs in Indian mythology, but also as companion of our souls in Egyptian and Welsh mythology, and guardians of our world, this and the other worlds in Norse and Greek mythology. So we do seem to cherish our dogs, don't we? So do I. That's Walter, my hound. He looks quite handsome in a different angle, actually. And that's my pack, Tilly, Junior, and Walter. Yeah, they came into my world and changed it totally. It's full of dog hairs now. Okay, so at some point we realized the value, or the therapeutic value of dogs. And that started sometime in 1960s when Levinson, who was a child psychologist, by pure chance saw this interaction between his client and his dog, Jingles. I like that name. Actually, in that session, the child initially interacted with the dog before he interacted with the psychologist. And he started using this approach where possible. And these are the things that he observed. Non-judgmental relationship. Now, I do have a little bit of, I don't know if I agree with that fully, because I know absolutely sure my dogs do judge me at times, the looks I get. But complete and mutual acceptance. Now, that I agree, because they do give us that total unconditional regard and acceptance. And if you think about it, that actually links with the Rogerian sort of concept of person-centered therapy, to feel that, isn't it? And that's what dogs are giving us. Dogs can't talk back, good or bad, depends on the situation, I suppose. But another point that Levinson noted. Now, these are points that we will actually reflect back when we are discussing the results of the studies as well. What I like about this is that the comparison, the restlessness in a child, and how the child can relate that to the restlessness in a dog. And it's almost normalizing that restlessness, isn't it? But most importantly, what he pointed out is that distressed child, they don't want to be judged. What they really want is to be accepted, admired, and permitted to regress. So this is when they have a little bit of tantrum. It's okay to give them the space to do it. That's because they can't actually control their emotions at that stage, and not to feel guilty about it. And these are things that the dogs can provide them with. And since we have seen the increased use of dog-assisted therapies interventions, hold on, I'm pressing too soon. There's plenty of evidence that indicates the benefits of dog therapy in physical health, mental health care settings. But what I want to kind of highlight is the physiological responses that actually happens in our body. So that lowering of cortisol levels, blood pressure, managing heart rate, and our alpha waves, the brain waves, calm brain waves, and blood oxygenation. What I like about that is the cortisol level reduction. I mean, cortisol is a primary stress hormone in our body. We need that for our functioning. So when we wake up in the morning, we have higher levels of cortisol in our body. And we need that to face the day, have the energy to actually do something. But when we are stressed, with higher levels of stress, the levels of cortisol increase in the body as well. And sustained stress means sustained higher levels of cortisol. And that is not so good for our body, so it's detrimental. So having a brief encounter with the dog and it releases this level of cortisol, that's quite something. And the rest of the aspects, how it can influence our psychological well-being. There is even some evidence of canine-assisted mediation. Apparently, it started with couples when they're separating, but it seems to be used in other contexts as well now. And we know about the education settings. Dogs are used for managing emotional difficulties in children, or behavior management, as it is referred to. But more importantly, about increasing the confidence and improving the relationship of the child with their peers, with their teachers in the school, as well as that relationship with school itself. So quite interesting that. And that's where the first study comes into play. So this is looking at the confidence in reading in primary school children, and how having a dog might actually be beneficial. Now, the idea came about when I had these two different information at the same time. One was Rich Picking and Joe Pike had this brilliant study where they used robotic cats, wasn't it? Yeah, as companions for people with dementia. Around the same time, there's our friend, Mr. Ian Keith, who was then the primary school head teacher, right, in Llandudno, in Sancho. And he had this idea of using dogs in primary school for the children to read to. And I thought, oh, what a brilliant idea to bring that as a control study, to look at the three different groups, children reading to a dog, a robotic dog, or reading as usual to their teacher, and see what the difference is in their experiences as well as their reading abilities. So that's where we started off. Our colleagues who collaborated on this project, Julie Myers, she's a senior lecturer in computing here, and of course, Professor Rich Picking. We also had psychology students as research assistants. So Kirsty Rogers and Andy Payne, we have both of them here today. They have since graduated and gone on to do bigger things in psychology. Kirsty is actually doing her PhD here with us on an interesting topic, intergenerational activities and interaction and the benefits of it. How interesting is that? So, to bring back to this research, we also had external collaborators, so the different schools, all these schools in North Wales, these are all primary schools. So, Ysgol Sancho, Maesglas, Suinadon, Gwenbro, Hiradig, Penmorva, and Rostegwan. They took their time to engage with this research, but unfortunately, we had the pandemic to deal with, so we only had data from 3 of those schools. The study was also part funded by GWE, which is a North Wales Regional School Improvement Service. So what did we do? So the participants for the study was primary school children and teachers, and we were looking at the entry criteria for the study was their reading scores. We wanted the students to the children to be somewhere between 85 and 90, meaning they would be in the low average reading ability kind of category. The reason being, unlike talking, it's a little bit more anxiety provoking when you're starting to learn to read, because you have these cognitive and non-cognitive components of reading, right? So when a child is trying to learn to read, they need to recognize the sounds that goes with the shapes, right? The phonemes and the graphemes. And you need to pull that together and say, how does that word, how do you pronounce that word, and what that word means, and how that changes with the additional letters added to it, the morphemes. So all of that information really is something that the child builds gradually. But for that to happen, you need that non-cognitive components for the child to be able to actually start reading, trying, attempting. And that links to the self-efficacy, the concept that if the child feels that they are able to or they're capable of reading, then they are motivated to read, and therefore they engage with that reading. So that was the idea. So that's where we were targeting. This is not my clicker, sorry. So that's what we were targeting, because we knew that dogs couldn't really help with the cognitive aspects of it. So we used a mixed design, meaning we got the qualitative and quantitative aspects. So qualitative, the experiential side, what did the children feel, experience while they were reading in the scenarios, as well as the measurable aspects like the reading score. So we measured that at baseline, after the intervention, after the term 1, and at the end of the year. We had the plan for it, but it didn't quite work because of the pandemic. So this is what we did. We placed the eligible children who consented in one of the 3 groups. So there was the reading with dogs. So that's actually one of the child's part of the study, reading to Kellen, the dog in Sancho. And that's a robotic dog, just like our biscuit here on the table, as well as the reading to a teacher or a teaching assistant. Now, the way we allocated the groups, we had to be a little bit sensitive because they are very young children. So we gave them the choice. And where there was a bit of competition, the teachers had to negotiate with them. So it would be like if the child wanted to read to the robotic dog, but was placed to read to a teacher, then they got to play with the robotic dog at the end of the day, or even the dog if they wanted to. So that was the deal. And the intervention was a one-to-one reading for 10 minutes, and that repeated 3 times a week, so over 3 days. And this was an intervention additional to their curriculum. So we didn't change anything they do on a day-to-day basis. We just did this as an additional activity. So you can imagine the additional time the teachers had to put in, and I do appreciate that, really. At the time of lockdown, when we had to kind of wind up the study, we had interviews with 6 children, 5 teachers, and we had reading scores for 7 children from 2 different schools. So we had to do a little bit of rethinking about how we manage the data. The qualitative side was fine because we could look at the patterns emerging, the different experiences that the children had, and we could kind of construct themes for that. But with the reading scores, we couldn't do a comparison of before and after as a group. So we looked at it as a case study, looking at how each child actually changed their reading ability. So these are the major themes from the interview: positive reinforcement and motivation, engagement and relationship, gaining confidence, and reading improvements. Yes. So this is what I like. This wasn't something expected, but how that maps onto the self-determination theory, as a psychologist, I do like that. So the theory states that the intrinsic motivation, that's the internal drive, right, to do something, that requires 3 basic psychological needs. The first one being relatedness. So you can see how that easily links to the engagement and relationship. Autonomy. So that is the person, trying to do a behavior on their own volition, so initiating a behavior. And for that to happen, they need some confidence, right? So that links with the gaining confidence element and the competence. The child may or may not have in reality improved, but it's about the child's perception whether they have improved or not. It's that, oh, so sensitive this. So the competence is kind of linked to the reading improvements. Okay, so we're just going to look at the themes in a little bit more detail. So the positive reinforcement and motivation came from 3 different kind of the external, internal, as well as the well-being aspects of the child. So the external being the one-to-one time that they had, and it didn't matter whether that was with a dog or a robotic dog or a teacher, they appreciated that. The other aspect is non-judgmental experience. This kind of links back to what Levinson had already mentioned. That comes through quite strongly from children. You wouldn't think primary school children actually thinking so deep, but they do. And then having the opportunity to read without interruptions. They really wanted that. Internal aspects where they were feeling okay to try, they really, when they feel like they're okay to try, they're motivated to try more. Oopsie. And then they also like reading to the dog and robotic dog. Hold on. So this is a bit of interview excerpts that I'm going to share with you. So the teacher's observation, children are always really, really keen to do it. Nobody wanted to drop out. Some children would complain on a day they missed their reading session. So if the school had a closure unexpectedly, and it was their day of reading, they weren't happy about that. And they would make sure they got that opportunity another time. So they really enjoyed it. This is a child reading to a dog. Because a human actually can read, and then when somebody else is reading, you're like, oh, what are they going to say? Right? The fear of judgment coming through. And then with the dog, they're not going to say anything. Again, reflect back to Levinson's point of dogs don't talk back. And in this case, it's quite positive. And so they can't say words or kind of interrupt you. The fear of, they don't like that dislike of interruption there. So the child reading to a dog. So whenever I say a word, somebody would say the word correct, which is kind of annoying. You get that, don't you? Finally, the fear of judgment again. I feel like reading to somebody that won't judge. These are young kids, young children thinking about these things. Engagement and relationship, and the sub-themes are bonding, feeling like they are being listened to, as well as interaction. They want an interaction, but different children want a different type of interactions, if you like. And they also wanted the quiet space for reading. So this is a child reading to a dog. You get to stroke it. It's a process of bonding, isn't it? But also think about the physiological response that the child's body is going through, that stroking the dog, reducing their stress levels while they're engaging with an anxiety-provoking sort of reading, if you like. This is teacher's observation. Gwen, they named the robotic dog every school. She is much more reactive, so if you stroke, she responds, whereas Roxy, the real dog, kind of just lay there and ignored everybody. Not so good. They weren't happy about that. And that reflects the child's comment there. She's not listening to me. Not happy at all. And this is a child reading to a teacher because it's nice and relaxing. Miss R loves reading. That shared experience, that shared pleasure in that moment, they appreciate that. Gaining confidence. The sub-themes were feeling superior, trying bigger words, and aiming for validation. So this is the child reading to a robotic dog. He doesn't really understand the books, and I do. Isn't that quite something? Because it's relative, isn't it? For the child, he's now on the superior sort of level of reading, so he's happy to do that. Reading to a dog, I'm making sure I read stuff right and bigger words. I always put my finger there to spell. I like this because this is the child actively thinking about the grapheme forming, the shape and the sound going together. And they are actually applying what they learned in their classes while they're reading. This is an additional stuff that they're doing. And this is a child reading to a dog. Feel like since I have read with the dog, my confidence has grown. I want to do it to the teacher to show my confidence has grown and that I'm better in reading. How sweet is that? They know they are better, they feel that, but they want validation from their teacher. Reading improvements, child as the initiator. So this is kind of linking to the growth mindset where the individual is kind of exploring to expand their knowledge base, right? They are taking the initiative. And feeling able to try bigger books and improve reading. Nope. That's it. So whenever I have a book, I have to read it to Miley, but when I'm done that book, the timer isn't finished. I have to get a new book and read it to Miley until the timer is done. So they're not just finishing an action or an activity, they're utilizing the full time that they've got to continue reading. Reading to a robotic dog, this child. I just read more, I think, so I am reading a big book right now. I couldn't remember the name, but I remember this child because they were absolutely sure that they didn't improve. They say, no, I don't think my reading has improved, but they do remember that they are trying bigger books, trying to read bigger books. And the final observation of the teacher, the children who picked up books that were longer than they could read in their session, they did go back to those books and continue. And well, actually, quite a few of them got more accurate and faster. So the teacher is actually observing that improvement in the children. So these are the relating to the reading scores of the 7 children that we got. I'll explain. It's a difference between the 2 scores. So before the intervention and after at the end of term 1. So after a space of a time for the intervention, if you like. So if the 2 scores were the same and they didn't make any difference, you would expect that on the line 0, right? And if they improved, you would see the child's scores above 0. And where the child's the reading scores worsened, you would see that below the line of 0, if you like. So you've got 2 children here whose reading scores kind of were worse after the intervention. But what we don't know is that experience, because we don't have the link to the interviews, whether we did actually interview those children or not. We don't know that yet. So that was a shame, but something to kind of bear in mind when we go and if you're doing future studies, I suppose. But what is important is that 5 out of the 7 children, they had improved reading scores. And this is just with that intervention of just children reading. There was no intervention, there was no correction. It was just children reading additionally, whatever they liked, really. Yeah, and they all kind of were based in different groups. So 3 of the children were reading to a dog, 2 children to a robotic dog, and 2 children to the teacher. That's it. Oh, yes. And then this is the model that we proposed on the basis of the interview, the data from the interview, as well as discussions with the teachers from the schools. And so I would say this is a co-production with the teachers because it was their idea as well. So the idea is that to first provide the stage, a step for the children to kind of read in a non-judgmental kind of space where they feel okay to try, right? And then the next stage to facilitate that, nurture that reading behavior. So to use positive reinforcement, whether that is additional time with the robotic dog or whatever that motivates the child, if you like. And then final stage to allow the child to kind of gain that growth mindset, right? To try and correct themselves, learn a bit more, giving them the power to kind of ask questions, if you like. This is a proposed model. We haven't yet tested it. So it would be nice to do some research in future to do that, potentially. Okay, so the second study. So this is looking at a brief dog therapy session and what that has an impact on university students. So the collaborators, my colleagues, Dr. Natalie Roche, principal lecturer in psychology. She's actually my boss. And Angela Winstanley, senior lecturer in animal behavior studies based in Northup, and Kirsty Rogers, colleague and PhD student. We also have student collaborators on this project, so all psychology students, Alice Jones, Emma Reckinson, Phoebe Barber, Emma Telfer, and Thomas Crawley. 2 of the students have since graduated and finished the degree. The rest are here. They are here today. Do we have a hands up? Tom, Phoebe, yes, thank you. So the idea for this research, the theory behind it is looking at how I'm way. I should have trained on this one, this clicker. So the theory is that the biopsychological theory of emotions, which is saying that the environment, how we respond, how our physiology responds to the environment, and how that makes us interpret the emotions, if you like. So if it's a positive environment, we might actually interpret things a little bit more positively. So that's what we were testing. And we had the external collaborators, Therapy Dog Nationwide, brilliant team. We had several of their therapy dogs on several days, actually. So we had 5 days of data collection on Glasgow campus, and I think we had one in Northup as well, didn't we? Yeah. Study was part funded by our Faculty of Social and Life Sciences as well, which was great. So we had 122 students who completed the study. Criteria just being that they should be 18 or over, and university students at Wrexham. Exclusion being fear of dogs and allergy to dogs and dog hair. We used a repeated measure design, just basically comparing before and after. So we measured things like their well-being score. We looked at their anxiety levels, and we looked at their perceived stress, and we looked how they did at the baseline before the therapy session and after the therapy session, right? The procedure was quite simple, really. So we placed 5 students in a group, and they got 15 to 20 minutes with a dog. Not a lot of time, right? If you just think about one-to-one time, it's probably like 4 minutes, if that. And we just compared their well-being scores, anxiety scores, and stress scores. So this is what we found. This is relating to the well-being. The first column is before the scores before the therapy, and the second column being scores after the therapy. I need to master this. So the positive experience, as you can see, slightly increased, and the negative experiences decreased. So it's a balance, a better balance between the 2 emotions, right? Just with that 15 minutes, that's what you got to bear in mind here. It's that brief. And then state and trait anxiety measures. Again, shows a similar pattern. After that 15-minute therapy session, it's kind of reduced. And this is actually the state anxiety measure was significantly kind of reduced, but with a medium effect, means it was a reasonably good effect of the therapy on their state anxiety levels. Similar pattern with perceived stress, reduced after the intervention. Just 15 minutes, that's all it is, and it makes a big difference in the person's well-being. And we have taken this on board, and we have been using dog therapy sessions for our students. We had it last year, didn't we? And we had it for this enrichment week as well. just a couple of weeks ago. So we do utilize that. It's a simple method, accessible, and a lot of fun as well. I think that is it. So this is a quick summary. That reading to dog, for the primary school children, it does improve their confidence, reading confidence, but also the proposed 3-step model of how we can improve their confidence to reading. I'll be on time. And then a very brief intervention of dog therapy, how that improves well-being, reduces stress, and reduces anxiety. What's not to like? Those are the references. Oh yes, and this is my reminder to remind you that we got therapy dogs in B07 just down the corridor. You will see that. Oh yes. Oh, Oshan is such a lovely dog. We did say hello earlier. Yeah, please go and say hello to them. They've been their lovely dogs. And then I do have one more request. So we are interested in developing this community research in psychology. So we are inviting community members to join hands with us to think about research ideas, to develop and do that research with us as partners. If you're interested, that's the QR code to express your interest. You can share that as wide as you want, and hopefully we'll be able to do something in future. I think that's it from me. Thank you all. Thank you very much.